Cost Accounting, Improve Performance Using Variances. This is Ken Boyd, the owner of St. Louis Test Preparation. This is our email address and our phone number, and also a website for a university where professors put up some very good information in the forms of PowerPoint and other resources to help with these accounting concepts that we're covering. And I want to first define some terms when we're measuring performance. Now that you've done variance calculations and variance analysis, how can we use that to improve performance? First of all, effectiveness. How close was your budget to actual? The less variances you have, the closer budget is to actual, which means that your budget was effective. Second, efficiency. How much of what you spent was wasted? For example, if you're cutting blue jeans out of pairs of denim, how much of the denim got wasted? How much of your labor costs got wasted because a machine broke and the person couldn't work and you still had to pay them? Those are the kinds of waste and inefficiency ideas that we're talking about here. And finally, when you investigate a variance, you can look at it as a whole dollar amount, for example, favorable or unfavorable by $10,000. Or you can look at it as a percentage of sales, for example. Let me flip over to Excel and we'll show you an example. Here's a flexible budget we used in an earlier course, and if you look at these variances in this column, you'll see that the sales variance was positive or favorable by $500,000. That's the dollar variance. Instead, we could have looked at it as a percentage of sales. That $500,000 happens to be 10% of the $5 million in sales. So we could look at the variance either way. Continuous improvement. Reducing costs by a certain percentage goal each year. And the reason you want to keep pushing down those costs is if you're selling something for $100 and you're able to reduce the cost of producing it from $70 to $69 to $64 on and on, your profit margin, sales minus cost, is getting wider all the time. And what you may do is budget going into future years based on those predicted lower costs based on the continuous improvement plan you have in place. So if we're going to reduce spending 1% a year, next year our budget is going to include costs that are 1% lower. Let's look at an example of continuous improvement. At the bottom of the page here, we say that our goal is to cut costs 1% a year. And those are the variable costs. If you look up here at the top, variable costs for 2010, which is our budget year, happen to be 1.2 million. You'll see the same thing at the bottom of the page here. And we're also assuming that the level of production, the number of blue jeans we produce, stays the same at 100,000 pairs of jeans. So in 2011, our costs are 99% of the 2010 level. And in 2012, our costs are 98% of the 2010 level. So we're continuously improving, we're continuously lowering cost, which increases our profit margin, everything else being the same. And finally, output level per unit versus per batch. We haven't talked about batch yet, and this addresses the question, where are our costs occurring? And we can look at it a few ways. One might be, we're going to look at costs one pair of jeans at a time. We're putting in direct labor, direct material into each pair of jeans. But another way to look at it is per batch. You may be incurring costs on things, manufacturing and producing things, once they're in batches, once they're put together in groups. And I want you to think about making a batch of cookies from a recipe to help with this example. Batch level costs, Kara's Cookies 2010 budget. So let's think about cookies. Kara produces 100,000 cookies, and she produces it in two different types. Think about cookie tins. You may get tins of cookies at Christmas time, at the holidays. Her basic cookie tin includes 12 cookies. her premier cookie tin includes 14 cookies, and she's producing 100,000 cookies for each type of tin. We're going to end up with batches. That is, we're going to end up with cookie tins that each contain a certain number of cookies. For the basic level, we take 100,000 divided by 12, and we end up with about 8,300 tins. Since we're putting more cookies in the premier tins, we only end up with about 7,100 tins. But the labor hours needed to create those batches is the same, per batch is the same in both. In both cases, whether we do a basic tin or a premier tin, we spend 17 labor hours per tin. We multiply the number of batches times the amount of hours per batch, and we get total labor hours. And you can see, since we have more tins for the basic cookie tin, we spend more hours, 141,000 roughly versus 121,000. Finally, we're going to take how much are we paying people per hour to put those tins together. We're paying a $20 hourly rate in both cases, so that our total labor costs are about $2.8 million for the basic Christmas tins and $2.4 million for the premier tins, and that is just the cost to process those batches. So that takes us back to output level versus batch level. One more thing here, back to the batch level example, and this is our homework question. Again, you can pause, rewind the video to get information on the question and to see all of this again when you work the homework. Here's the question. You can email me at the email address listed here to get an answer. Based on 100,000 cookies, which line of cookies produces more batches? What is the labor cost per batch of each line of cookie? And then the big question, assume that the only difference in labor cost between the two lines is the labor cost per batch. Everything else is the same, direct material, direct labor, overhead. How much higher would the sale price per batch have to be on the more expensive line so that each line of cookies had the same profit? So if one has a batch cost of $100 and the other has a batch cost of $120, one of the lines is going to have a price increase. How much would that price increase have to be? So 1 and 2 on the homework we've really already talked about, so your homework question is 3, and you can email me at the email address above to find out. That's the end of part 12 on cost accounting. Part 13 will be on YouTube soon. You can find a complete listing on the home page of my website of all of our videos, grouped by type and description. For live tutoring and live chat sessions, that's also on my website, stltest.net. We do one-on-one live chatting using GoToMeeting.com. And finally, our email address and our phone numbers at the bottom. Thanks very much. We'll see you next time.